My father stood in the center of my sister's wedding reception, raised his glass with theatrical gravity, and smiled out at 200 guests like a politician about to deliver a keynote. Then he cleared his throat and announced, with perfect paternal gravity, that he was still paying my college tuition. The room rippled with polite laughter. Heads turned toward me, not with curiosity, but with that particular brand of sympathy reserved for the family disappointment. My sister Emily smirked into her champagne flute. My mother beamed like she'd just won an award for parenting. They all thought they were putting me in my place, delivering a public reminder of my dependence. What nobody in that room knew, not my parents, not Emily, not the groom shifting uncomfortably in his chair, was that I hadn't touched their tuition money in months. I had already graduated, I had already built a career, and I was already earning more than the man sitting beside my golden child sister, whose biggest achievement that year had been upgrading his car. So when my father handed me the microphone, expecting a tearful thank you speech, he accidentally gave me something far more dangerous than a platform. He gave me permission to tell the truth, and within the next 5 minutes, the entire wedding changed. Before we continue, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more powerful stories like this. And I'm always curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. I love seeing just how far these stories travel. Now, let's get back to it. My sister Emily had been the center of my parents' universe for as long as I could remember, not because she was exceptionally talented or kind, but because she was Emily, and that had always been enough. When she brought home A's and B's in middle school, my parents hired a private tutor to ensure she'd never slip. When I graduated near the top of my high school class, they congratulated me over takeout and changed the subject to Emily's upcoming cheerleading competition. When she wanted a new car at 18, my father made it happen within a week. When I needed money for textbooks, I worked weekends at a grocery store, bagging groceries beside retirees who asked why a kid my age wasn't at the mall. That was simply how things worked in our family. I was the afterthought. Emily was the main event. Emily wasn't a bad person. Exactly. She'd just grown up believing the world revolved around her because everyone around her acted like it did. My parents praised every minor achievement, excused every mistake, and treated every milestone in her life like a national holiday. Meanwhile, I learned early that if I wanted something, I would have to earn it myself, and that was a gift they never realized they'd given me. I focused on school. I chased scholarships the way other kids chased concert tickets. I worked part-time jobs that left me exhausted but independent. While Emily spent weekends at parties and expensive restaurants, I spent mine in the library or picking up extra shifts. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. By the time I reached college, most of my tuition was covered through academic awards and internships. The little support my parents provided came with constant reminders about how generous they were being, as if I should be grateful for scraps they'd never offered my sister to earn. Then Emily got engaged. From that moment on, nothing else seemed to matter. Every family conversation became a wedding committee meeting. Every holiday gathering turned into a planning session complete with color swatches and seating charts. My parents poured money into venues, decorations, photographers, florists, and catering upgrades I'd never even heard of. The wedding wasn't just a wedding, it was the Emily show, and the rest of us were merely supporting cast. Soon the demands started coming my way. I was expected to attend every planning meeting, every rehearsal event, every family dinner, and every weekend activity connected to the wedding, as if my calendar belonged to them. It didn't matter that I had work deadlines or my own responsibilities or that I lived an hour away. Whenever I declined, even politely, my parents acted wounded, as though I'd personally insulted their parenting. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, my phone rang. It was my father, and the moment he started talking, I realized he still believed he controlled my future. My father didn't waste time with small talk. "You've been disappointing this family lately," he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge of disappointment he reserved just for me. I leaned back in my chair and listened, letting the words wash over me. "You keep skipping wedding events. Emily is hurt. Your mother is upset. Frankly, we're all tired of your attitude." I almost laughed. For months, every conversation had somehow become about Emily's wedding. Nobody asked about my work. Nobody asked about my plans. The family only seemed interested in one thing: obedience. Then came the ultimatum. If you don't show up and support your sister properly, we're done paying your tuition. There it was, the threat. The same threat my parents had used for years whenever they wanted control. Dangling that financial rope and watching me scramble to hold on. Except this time, it didn't work. Because the version of me they thought existed no longer did. I had graduated nearly 6 months earlier. Not only that, but I'd accepted a remote position with a growing software company shortly afterward, a job I'd secured through my own interviews, my own portfolio, my own relentless effort. The pay was far better than anything I'd expected straight out of school. In fact, after bonuses and contract work, I was already earning more than Emily's fiancé, whose job at his uncle's firm was more nepotism than merit. Nobody in my family knew, not because I was hiding it, but because nobody had bothered to ask. My father kept talking, his voice growing more confident with every word. You need to remember who's helped you get where you are. We've made sacrifices for you. The least you can do is show up for your sister. I stared out the window and let him finish. Of course, I said calmly, my voice so steady it surprised even me. The confidence in his voice immediately returned. He thought he'd won. When the call ended, I sat there smiling at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time in my life, they were trying to pull a string that wasn't attached anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, Emily's demands somehow became even bigger. She wanted me at rehearsals. She wanted me helping guests find their seats. She wanted expensive gifts from a registry that seemed designed for royalty. She wanted a speech praising her and her future husband in front of everyone. I agreed to everything. That surprised everyone. My parents suddenly became cheerful again, patting themselves on the back for their firm parenting. Emily acted victorious, strutting around like she'd won some competition I hadn't known we were in. They all assumed the tuition threat had forced me back into line. I let them believe it. Then, 2 days before the wedding, I received a copy of the reception program via email. The moment I read it, I understood exactly why they wanted me there. The wedding took place on a Saturday afternoon at an upscale country club just outside the city, the kind of place with chandeliers and valet parking and waitstaff who'd been trained to pretend they didn't notice the family drama unfolding. The moment I arrived, something felt off. Everyone in my family seemed unusually cheerful, not normal wedding day happy, but confident happy, like they were all in on a joke I hadn't heard yet. My mother kissed my cheek with exaggerated warmth. My father clapped my shoulder like a general greeting a soldier. Emily gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The groom looked at me with something that might have been pity. I smiled back at all of them. I knew what was coming, and I was ready. Like they were all waiting for something, Emily floated through the venue, greeting guests like a celebrity working a red carpet, air kisses, practiced smiles, perfectly rehearsed gratitude. My mother trailed half a step behind her, whispering to anyone who would listen about the months of planning, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices she'd made to create the perfect day. My father barely acknowledged me. He simply patted my shoulder with the condescending warmth of a boss reassuring a struggling intern and said, "Glad you finally came to your senses." I smiled and said nothing. The ceremony itself was uneventful. Emily and Ryan exchanged vows that sounded more like a corporate merger than a love story. Guests applauded on cue. Photos were taken with mechanical efficiency. Dinner was served to the gentle hum of small talk. But the real event started during the reception. As the champagne flowed and the programs were consulted, printed inside every reception booklet was a section called Family Tributes. Several family members were scheduled to speak, including my parents. The setup was deliberate, theatrical, a stage built specifically for my public humiliation. The first few speeches were harmless. Friends shared awkward anecdotes. Relatives offered generic congratulations. Then my mother stood, smoothing her dress like she was about to accept an award. At first, she talked about Emily's achievements, her education, her career, her wonderful relationship, but gradually, the speech shifted. She began talking about sacrifices, the sacrifices parents make for their children, the financial support, the opportunities, the years of hard work. Several times, she specifically mentioned how much help she and my father had provided to both their children. Though her eyes kept finding me, I knew exactly where this was going. Then my father took the microphone. Unlike my mother, he wasn't subtle. He praised Emily and Ryan as examples of responsibility and success. The kind of adults every parent hopes their children will become. Then he pivoted, smoothly, deliberately, and started talking about me. Not by name at first, just enough for everyone to connect the dots. He spoke about younger family members who still need guidance, people who should appreciate parental support, people who weren't quite established yet. Several guests turned toward me with expressions of practiced sympathy. I suddenly understood the entire plan. They wanted to present Emily and Ryan as the successful adults, and me as the struggling younger sibling who still depended on mom and dad for survival. Then came the final blow. My father smiled at the crowd with the satisfaction of a man delivering a knockout punch and mentioned the tuition money they were supposedly still paying. A few guests nodded sympathetically. Across the room, Emily looked absolutely delighted with herself, her smirk barely concealed behind her champagne glass. Then my father turned toward me and extended the microphone, expecting gratitude. Instead, he handed me control of the entire room. I stood up slowly, feeling 200 pairs of eyes lock onto me. I accepted the microphone like it was a live grenade. The room was completely silent. My father looked satisfied. My mother smiled expectantly, already mentally composing the thank you speech I was supposed to give. Emily sat beside her new husband with the expression of someone waiting for applause she'd already decided she deserved. I took a deep breath. First, I said, my voice steady and calm, I'd like to congratulate Emily and Ryan. I genuinely wish you both a happy future together. The guests nodded politely. So did my parents. So far, so predictable. Then, I continued, I also want to thank my family for all the support they've given me over the years. My father smiled even wider, practically glowing with vindication. That smile disappeared a few seconds later. Although, I said, letting the pause hang in the air, I was a little surprised to hear so much concern tonight about my tuition. Several people laughed softly, uncertainly. My parents didn't. The reason I was surprised is because I graduated 6 months ago. The room went completely still. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. My mother's smile froze mid-beat. My father blinked twice, his jaw tightening. Emily looked confused, her champagne glass suspended halfway to her lips. I kept going. I graduated early, thanks to scholarships, internships, and some very long nights, none of which involved family money. By the way, a few guests exchanged surprised glances. Someone near the back whispered something I couldn't hear. I accepted a full-time position shortly after graduation and have been working ever since. Remote, stable, growing. Now people were paying attention, real attention, the kind my family had never given me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't attacking anyone. I was simply telling the truth, letting it settle over the room like a cold front. My parents may not have known that because we've mostly talked about wedding plans for the last year. Every conversation, every dinner, every phone call, all wedding, all Emily, all the time. That earned a few uncomfortable chuckles. My father's face turned a shade of red that didn't match his tie. I continued calmly, my voice never wavering. The good news is that nobody needs to worry about my tuition anymore. It's already handled. Has been for months. Then I paused. The room leaned in, hungry for whatever came next. As for financial stability, I'm doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. Emily's husband shifted in his seat, suddenly fascinated by his plate. I wasn't trying to embarrass him. I was correcting the story that had been told about me, the version where I was the struggling dependent, the charity case, the family embarrassment. My current career has allowed me to become completely independent. In fact, my income is already higher than I ever expected this early in life, higher than many people my age. A stunned silence spread through the room. The narrative my parents had built all evening, the golden child and the burden, the success story and the cautionary tale, was collapsing in real time. I could see it in my mother's trembling smile, my father's clenched jaw, Emily's dawning realization that her spotlight was being stolen. And just when I thought the moment was over, a guest near the front, an older woman with kind eyes and an unreadable expression, raised her hand and asked a simple question. A question nobody in my family wanted answered. The guest smiled and asked, wait, if you graduated 6 months ago, did your parents attend your graduation? The room went silent again. I looked at my parents. Neither of them said a word. My mother stared at her napkin. My father suddenly became very interested in the chandelier. So I answered, honestly and without bitterness. No. They were busy touring wedding venues that weekend. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others suddenly seemed to understand far more than I had actually said. Nobody needed an explanation. The pattern spoke for itself. Years of favoritism. Years of neglect. Years of being the afterthought. All laid bare in one simple exchange. My parents tried changing the subject. My father clearing his throat loudly and gesturing toward the dessert table. Emily attempted to redirect attention back to the reception, clapping her hands and announcing the cake cutting. But the atmosphere had changed. The story everyone had been told no longer matched the reality they'd just witnessed. I handed back the microphone, congratulated the newlyweds one final time with genuine grace, and returned to my seat. Not long afterward, I quietly slipped out of the reception, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to freedom. Outside, the night air hit my face like a baptism. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even realized was there. The funny thing is, I never wanted revenge. I just wanted the truth, and the truth had finally been spoken. Over the following months, my career continued growing. New opportunities appeared. My savings increased. Most importantly, I stopped measuring my worth through my family's approval. Eventually, my parents reached out, cautiously, awkwardly, as if testing whether I'd still answer the phone. For the first time, I set clear boundaries. For the first time, they had no leverage left. Because the greatest lesson I learned was simple. My parents thought tuition gave them power over my future. What they never realized was that I'd already built one without them. Sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who think they know you best. My parents believed they controlled my future, but they never realized I had already built one on my own, brick by brick, night by night, without their help. And standing in that parking lot, watching the golden light of the reception still reflecting on, I realized I was finally finished. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss the next unforgettable story.